Hey there, folks. Welcome to another one of our fantastic DevReach speaker interview series. Today, I have with me Josh. You want to go ahead and give us a quick introduction?
Sure. Thanks, Kathryn. Hi, everyone. I'm Josh. I'm an independent open source maintainer in the TypeScript ecosystem. Most notably, I work on TypeScript-eslint, the tooling that lets you run tools like ESLint and Prettier on your TypeScript code, which are awesome and very useful. I also wrote the O'Reilly Learning TypeScript book, and I generally futz around on the internet with open source things. So happy to be here.
Amazing. So I'm going to start us off by asking you to tell us a little bit about your career journey. What made you so passionate and so excited about TypeScript? What kind of led you here?
Sure. I started off with a CS degree. I always liked the fundamentals, but I particularly liked JavaScript and the web, how things can get really quickly in front of users, how you can make fun websites, little games and whatnot. And although that stuff is very fun, because of the nature of JavaScript, which is very dynamic and loose, it can be easy to make quick things that fall apart at scale. TypeScript gives you a lot of great tooling and wait, no, don't do that. You'll break something help when you get to bigger apps. So I really enjoyed being able to make fun things that actually are usable at scale. That makes me happy.
Nice. You mentioned before a lot of what you do right now is open source maintenance, right? So can you tell us a little bit more about your work in open source and maybe a little bit deeper dive on some of the projects you maintain?
Yeah. I do sometimes miss having a job. I used to work at Microsoft, then Codecademy, and I really enjoyed making things for other developers. But I found that as I went along in my career, I kept taking a step back and doing the stuff to help the stuff that I was working on before. Towards the end of my professional employment section of my life, I just was working on developer tooling for developer tooling, like design systems, static analysis stuff. And I've always just really enjoyed that. Open source means you get to work on the tooling that everyone uses. Instead of working on your specific, whatever, framework usage, your own website, you're working on the tools that are the framework or that are find bugs in people's usage of the framework. So a lot of the projects that I work on now, whether it's the stuff that I am a maintainer on, such as TypeScript-eslint, or actively contribute to, like, for example, ESLint and TypeScript, I really like being able to help people at scale and help people across the world without actually having to, sit down with every specific one of them. It's nice.
That is really cool. And I hear so much of that mirrored with what you just said about like, I really enjoyed the foundations of stuff and being able to like take it back and be like, I liked this, but then I wanted to work on the thing that was building that. And then I wanted to work on the thing that was building that. Like, that is really cool.
Thanks.
So for folks who are completely new to TypeScript, obviously this is something that I know you don't like being called an expert, but I'm going to call you an expert anyway. Something you're kind of an expert in. So could you give us maybe kind of an elevator pitch for folks that have maybe been a little hesitant to make that jump from like vanilla JavaScript to TypeScript? Why should folks think about making that swap?
Definitely. Vanilla JavaScript, or JavaScript without any flavors added, is a language that allows you to declare the values in your code, what is or what will be, functions, classes, variables. But it doesn't give you a unified good way of describing the intent behind those values. You might say declare a function that takes in a parameter, but there's no built-in way to say what that parameter is supposed to look like. If it's an object with these 12 properties, 7 of which are optional, blah, blah, blah. TypeScript gives you a unified standard, something better than comments like JSDoc, like an actual syntax for defining these types, these objects, and so on. And it provides you tooling around that, tooling that can detect when you have a mismatch, what is commonly called a type error, and tooling that can help you develop. Things like find all references, go to definition, rename. And all that tooling is much better when you have a nice, well-typed application, meaning an application that has types declared for all your stuff or most of your stuff, so that TypeScript can give you really smart IntelliSense around it. So I'd say if you want to learn TypeScript, it's okay not to dive right in and make everything super strict and strongly typed. You can gradually adopt it. But as you get more and more proficient with TypeScript and your code gets more and more typed, you'll find that your development will be faster and more streamlined and have fewer bugs, which I think sounds very exciting.
Yes, you actually did a pretty fantastic job of queuing me up for my next question, because I was going to ask you about what the learning curve looks like. And you mentioned a little bit like you don't have to jump all the way in. You can kind of just start using these pieces. Can you talk maybe a little bit more about that? Like, where do you see people get hung up, and what are some common mistakes, and what's kind of some reassurance that you don't necessarily have to go weigh in.
Reassurance is always good. I'd say first learn the foundations. I'm always about learning foundations before getting into the edge cases.
Yes.
The concept of the type system. Stuff becomes in existence, it is an initial value, and then the type system makes sure you stick to that value or refine it as you go on. And that type of understanding, really knowing how TypeScript behaves, will help you whether you're using some back-end Node thing, some front-end web thing, whatever framework library you're using. So the learning curve for TypeScript, I don't think is too steep. That being said, there are cases where people write wild and wacky code, and then TypeScript needs to do complex things in the type system, or rather your code needs to do complex things in TypeScript's type system to represent that. So if you are finding cases where TypeScript is giving you a hard time, a couple thoughts. One, simplify the code if you can, because complex code results in complex types, and both of those are bad for readability. But also, it's fine to use an escape hatch. There are quite a few ways to tell TypeScript, shut up, I know what I'm doing, stop yelling at me. Well, most commonly the any type, which is the YOLO or whatever. So it's totally fine to use an escape hatch if you don't have the time, patience, energy, whatever it is, to get TypeScript perfectly right as you're learning.
I'm curious, do you think people need to have a really solid foundation with like vanilla JavaScript first, or if someone is kind of just starting out on their, web development journey, is it okay for them to like jump right to TypeScript?
It is okay. I think there are a lot of different strategies people can take that are valid, but it is not the strategy that I would recommend. My recommendation would be to understand the foundations of JavaScript and maybe a few of the more non-foundational things first. Specifically, I would generally recommend understand scoping, like with variables, let const inside functions, understand passing functions around, like first class functions, and generally how arrays work in JavaScript. So nothing too complex. You don't need to use the fancy language features like symbols or proxies or any of that. And the reason why is I think you'll have an easier time understanding TypeScript in the way that it builds on top of JavaScript if you already understand the foundations it's building on top of. Yeah.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. That one was one that I was just curious about, because I feel like it's become so common that a lot of times when a new person is jumping into an application, it's already in TypeScript. So.
Yeah, and if you're like, say, switching to a new team at work or a new project that you and your friends or whatnot are working on, it's totally reasonable to just, okay, I was whatever, C#, now I'm TypeScript. That's fine. Yeah. But I do recommend trying to learn JavaScript first if you have the time and energy to, because I like learning one thing at a time, and that is one thing at a time.
Yes, totally valid. So in your talk, TypeScript for JavaScripties, which you will be giving at DevReach this year in Sofia, Bulgaria this October, which is, of course, why we have you here. In your talk description, you referenced the $1 billion mistake. I was really curious what that is.
The $1 billion.
If that doesn't give away too much of your talk, feel free to decline if that's a spoiler alert situation.
It's not a spoiler, don't worry. It's a side tangent that I think is awesome because it's such a cool name. It's the idea that allowing null or void or doesn't have a value objects to be provided in places that expect something that has a value. It's the idea that has caused billions, if not more, dollars of software damage, like in bugs, wasted dev time. Like in a lot of languages, traditional type ones, if you, let's say, declare that a function takes in a string, you can pass null to that function. That's totally allowed, which is ridiculous. Now we have to, in every function, check whether string is or it's null or whatever. So in TypeScript, one of the compiler options you can opt into, what's called strict null checks, is saying no, null is not assignable to literally anything else on the planet, nor undefined. And that is a very good thing, and that solves the $1 billion mistake.
That's good. The thought of that, I mean, I guess $1 billion makes sense when you think about all the software in the world and how many times that's like added up. But that feels so wild to think about.
Yeah, it's really cool.
So I'm actually going to jump us back a little bit to something when we were talking about when you're starting off, it's good to start with JavaScript. For those who are maybe kind of more advanced level or who have been programming for a while, do you think there's still a place for vanilla JavaScript in the applications we're building? Or do you think all TypeScript all the time?
I think mostly no, but not no. I think there is probably a small space. Anything more than 3 is generally when I go for TypeScript, where 3 can be referring to the number of files or the number.
I was about to ask 3 of what, but you got there first.
I have generally a rule of 3. If you have 3 or more files in something, whether it's a script or a program or what, that's when you start to import between files or declare globals or something, and typing really helps out there. If you have more than 2 people, honestly, most of the time, if you have 2 or more people working on something, you really want some shared documentation standard with them. So maybe at 2, definitely at 3. 3 or more, I would recommend TypeScript. So if you have like this one little shell script that just happens to be implemented in JavaScript with a help framework, that's fine. But I like TypeScript anything more than that.
So to wrap things up on a lighter note, since I hit you with the hard questions, I'm curious what you're most looking forward to at DevReach. Have you ever been to Sofia before?
No, I mean, for one, it's a conference with a lot of other great speakers other than me who are great. Yeah.
You're allowed to be, you are included in the great speakers.
Trying not to get on that list. Yeah, no, I'm excited about that. But also, yeah, I've only rarely been to anything in that area. The closest for me was Serbia, which I also really enjoy visiting. So I'm excited to see Sofia and just hang out for a while. It's going to be great.
Me too. This will actually also be my first time. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very, very fun. I'll see you there.
Right. So, all right. I think that does it for us. I hope that you guys will come and join us. Again, that will be at DevReach, Sofia, Bulgaria. At the end of October, I will play us out with a little commercial that will give you all of the details, and hopefully we'll see you there. Thanks again for joining me, Josh.
Thanks for having me. Bye, everyone.